Basically, this course is on the history of liberal arts. It's on, well, your ICU students. The ICU teaches in a liberal arts style. Liberal arts isn't just one discipline, one subject. It is a method of teaching. It is a way of teaching. It is a way of education. It's a way of learning. All cultures, all societies usually have an education system. And then there's questions you want to ask. Why educate young people? Why not just let them be ignorant? いいじゃない. Well, most cultures throughout history and in different places of the world, they have an education system and they educate young people. Why do they do that? And then what do they teach? What are the contents of education? And then how do they teach? Remember that word, pedagogy. Well, these are perennial questions. Different places, different times, but what's the purpose of education? Is the education, say here at ICU or in Japan, is it for your own personal self-cultivation to make you smarter for yourself? Is that the purpose? Some countries actually say, well, no. Actually, even Japan, before the war, 教育は国のため. You get educated for the sake of the state, not for the individual. You remember also, I think I told you that in the post-war period, the early Kyoiku Kihonho of Japan did stress individual cultivation, to make you make you a whole person, to make students. And it was the idea what you will be, education is for the sake of the individual. But that Kihonho changed. Maybe 2006, I think. There was a new Kyoiku Kihonho, which started to put in new types of, old types of topics like dotoku, morality, or aikokushin as part of the education curriculum. Now, why do they do that? These are questions I want us to think about and as we go on. But every society approaches education differently, and changes come across over time. And as a historian, I like to look at origins. Where is the beginning point, the so-called shupatsten? We can really go back to ancient Greece and see some sort of archetypes, some early models about who has the right to educate the youth. Whose job is it? And what should they be taught? How should they be taught? And as I said, those questions which were debated back at the time of Socrates are still alive today. And should morality, dotoku, be taught in schools? Or is that something the family should do? Or should aikokushin be a part of the curriculum? These are issues that are still very much alive. In ancient Greece, there were competing ideas about, there was a debate. Some, in your reading, by Martha Nussbaum, the Socratic self-examination, it starts off with looking at Aristophanes, his play called, it's kind of a comedy satire, The Clouds. And he calls it the old education. Remember we talked about that in our first class, the old education. And that it acculturated young citizens to traditional values. They learned to internalize and to love their traditions. And they were discouraged from questioning them. You might say the old, what was the kind of the basis of an early tradition of education, sort of called the old education? Well, there were the epics, the Homeric epics. There was the stories of the gods. And there were many stories of how people fought for their country. You know, Greece was a martial, a lot of military values. It's a warrior society. And people fought and died for their state, for their city, for Athens or for Sparta. There were many examples of patriotism, love of your country, love of your state. In a sense, the early epics, these stories of heroic men and, of course, the gods, it's a little bit like the Bible as a sort of text which was the ultimate authority of what was good. And if the old education might say, well, okay, let's all memorize the epics. Let's all memorize the text. Let's all memorize, and then we will know, we will internalize, we will do things just like people did in the past. And if you question the epics, if you question the Bible, if you question authority, これはいけません. Okay? No questioning allowed. Belief is more important. So that was one model for education, the traditional. And you accept the status quo. You don't question it. And certainly, Socrates, what was his crime? What did he do wrong? Anybody remember? You know, Socrates was a real person. Plato was his disciple, and Plato records probably, a little bit favorably. But there are other references to Socrates. He was born and he died. He died in the same year as his trial, 399 BC. He was born in 400 and let's see. I had those dates here. 469 BC and died in 399 BC. Okay, he was a real person. But what was his crime? Why did they kill him? Why was he found guilty to the extent that he had to be executed? Well, he drank hemlock, killed himself. But that was his. What did he do wrong? Anybody remember? He told them the wrong things. So-called wrong things. Okay. I think they say he corrupted the youth. Corrupted. Can make them corrupt. Make them think the wrong things. Okay. Okay. In other words, as a teacher, he didn't teach the right things. What was the right? What did he teach them was so bad that if I teach you wrong, am I going to get executed? 大変よ. Maybe I better not teach you anything if I get executed. What was so bad about what he taught? Yeah, have a doubt. Mm-hmm. Don't respect your parents. Did he really say that? No. Yeah. There were lots of rumors around him, lots of gossip, and as he defended himself, here I am. I'm Socrates, but I'm not the person that people talk about. But there were many rumors, like in drama, and other people said. But he was a teacher, and he did teach people to question, and to question authority, and to think differently. He did question tradition. Now, why would questioning tradition? And I ask you too, question. And I'm also a teacher who's going to say, don't just believe everything you read. Don't believe everything you hear. Just because it's written in the Asahi Shimbun. Okay, let's believe it. とんでもない. Okay, shall I get executed? We live in a little more free society. But some societies aren't like that. Some societies still enforce a rigid education of belief. Okay, well, let's look at it. The old education, and Socrates has a different form. He questions authority. He wanted young people to think for themselves. And not only that, he wanted a rational answer. And he went around, remember, people were criticizing him, saying, "You're so smart." And he said, "Well, I'm not really. I don't know anything." He said, "I start from ignorance. And then I try to find out about things." He was curious. And then he said, "Well, am I really the smartest person?" And he went to the Delphic oracle and asked, "Who's the smartest person?" And the answer came back, "It's Socrates." I can't be the smartest. And then he went around and he started asking questions to the politicians. They couldn't answer. He went to the poets and they couldn't answer. He went to the merchants and craftsmen. Well, why are we being ruled by people who are stupid? Basically, it came to that sort of, and not only did he teach, but he also questioned the authority of the cultural and the political leaders of Greece. In a sense, what he was doing almost amounted to treason. What is treason in Japanese? Hangyakusha janakute, maybe treason. It means to sell your country, baikokusha, going completely against the country. And that treason is an executable offense. You can be killed for treason. So his teaching was maybe by questioning authority could be considered even treason. Well, he didn't want people just to go through life accepting things without thinking about them. Ikinari, sometimes we are passive. We just accept things. People say it, it must be true. You read it, it must be true. But is there really a rational answer? Can I understand it by scrutinizing it, by looking at it very carefully, and this is the real reason? Sometimes we don't do that. Sometimes we're lazy. We just say, must be all right. Shikata ga nai kana. Must be okay. But Socrates doesn't want people to be lazy. He wants to be active learners. Okay? So, another form of education. I've got Socrates and I have the old traditions, the epics. But another form of education, and part of this debate, was also some of the playwrights themselves. Even Aristophanes, he wants you to think. He's using humor and satire to make you think. He's also, and also we look at the tragedies. And today, Sano Sensei is going to look at Antigone. They are also a form of mass public education. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. When you read a play, or see a play, it's entertaining, it's interesting, it affects you emotionally. Sometimes you might want to cry, sometimes it makes you angry, but it also makes you think. And that's another issue that we'll talk about later. Okay. Now, let me just go a little bit more in detail about Socrates and his period, and then I'll let Sano Sensei tell you more about the plays. Remember, I said Socrates was born. I said here it was 469 BC. Sometimes people use the word BCE, before the Common Era. And then he died. Of course, this goes backwards in 399 BC. And that is the date of his trial. Okay? Now, this was just at the time Well, at the kind of the end stage of the Peloponnesian Wars. Do you know the Peloponnesian Wars are between Athens and Greece, Athens and Sparta. And actually, the wars, as I say, we get a sense of, we must remember that all of this is in the backdrop. A lot of this action is behind the scenes, behind everybody's issues, is that it was a state at war. The Peloponnesian Wars are taking place between 431 BC and 404 BC. And this actually, the golden age of Greece, this might have, actually was pretty much around the time of, from the 470s until the late, about that 70 years. It's actually a pretty short period. The height of classical Greek culture was just around the time of the birth of Socrates, around 470 BC, and then the beginning of the Peloponnesian Wars. So it's often called Periclean. Do you know the word Pericles? I'll put his name up here. P-E-R. P-E-R-I-C-L-E-S, and his dates are 495 to 429 BC. Okay? And Pericles is a sort of embodiment of the kind of the leader of really the golden age of Greece at a time of when Greece was a true democracy. Athenian Athens, Athenian democracy. And he promoted the arts, he promoted literature, and Athens during under his leadership became a sort of educational and cultural center of Greece or even of the world. And you still see, if you go to Athens, you can see the Parthenon at the Acropolis, and the beautification. And the famous words that we have of Pericles are recorded in one of the earliest history books, and a history book that uses documents and uses sort of analysis. That's by Thucydides, called the Peloponnesian Wars. And in it, there is a famous funeral oration by Pericles. And in that funeral oration, he describes the city of Athens and its glories. He says, our form of government does not enter into rivalry with the institutions of others. Our government does not copy our neighbors. It's an example. We shine out. It's true that we are called a democracy, for the administration is in the hands of the many and not of a few. And neither is poverty an obstacle, but a man may benefit his country whatever the obscurity, even how humble he might be, he can still be of use he still can serve the country and be of value. There is no exclusiveness in public life. There's no, everybody can participate. In our private business, we are not suspicious of one another, nor angry with our neighbor. We are thus unconstrained in our private business, and a spirit of reverence pervades our public acts. We're prevented from doing wrong by respect for the authorities and the laws. And he goes on, and we have not forgotten to provide for our weary spirits many relaxations. We have games, we have sacrifices, our homes are beautiful and elegant, and because the greatness of our city, the fruits of the whole earth flow in on us, so that we enjoy the goods of other countries as freely as our own. This sort of open, liberal, sophisticated society and a democracy. And yet it's that democracy that executed Socrates. Okay? it actually was a direct democracy, but what are what are some of the problems though with this statement? Who is not included in the democracy of Greece? Women? No, women can't have rights to vote, right? Slaves, many slaves. It was very much a slave-owning and slave-using society. And of course, children are outside too. So it was slaves, women, children had no rights or less rights and couldn't vote. And there were maybe something like maybe 30,000 so-called free men. Remember, liberal artes, the education for free men. This is our starting point. The education was not so much for the women or children at that time, for the free men. It changes, of course, over time. And they could participate in the assembly, and they could participate in law courts. And there are juries, members in Socrates' trial had something like 600 and some jurors, people who listened and voted and narrowly convicted him and said, oh yeah, he should be executed. Well, どうですか? Do you think they should have executed Socrates? Do you think he was guilty of corrupting the youth? He was also charged with impropriety, which means impiety means he didn't respect the gods. So corrupting the youth and disrespect to the gods. He didn't worship them. He defended himself well. Actually, on the one hand, you say that I founded new gods, and then in other words, you say I didn't have any gods at all. And he said, your argument makes no sense. But he was charged with impiety. He didn't respect the gods. Should we execute him? How many of you think, just raise your hand, that he was guilty and should have been executed? Remember, the people at Athens at that time, the majority in his trial said he was guilty. How about you now? Nobody? You think you let him free? Why? Why would you allow somebody who questions authority and corrupts the youth and tells them strange things? Why would you let him go free? Actually, he's guilty. You know, the laws say that there are laws, and a society has laws. And if you don't respect the laws, you're guilty, right? So is it all right to break the law sometimes? 法律破ってもいい? Do you want to respect law? Yeah, okay. So what happens when you don't like the law? When I was a college student and I ran across some thinkers that was really quite interesting. Do you know the name Henry David Thoreau? Thoreau is a naturalist, environmental thinker, but also he's known for the beginning of one of the first person who is civil disobedience. And this was in the middle of the 19th century, a time of, and America was at war with Mexico. And there was a sort of, and in the process, taking over Texas as a state. And there was a tax because there was lots of military activities. You know, just like America today, lots of military activities, you need more money. Okay, let's have a tax and get more money so we can have more guns, we can have more troops, we can go and fight harder and get more territory. Okay. And so in Massachusetts, there was a tax to get money to support the war with Mexico over Texas. It's about 1849, something like that. Well, most law-abiding citizens paid their tax. That's the law. But Thoreau didn't like war. He was a pacifist. He didn't like killing. He didn't think the war, he disagreed with the war. And he refused to pay the tax. And because he refused to pay the tax, he was put into jail. And he's a well-known philosopher, writer, thinker, and he's in jail. And his friend, another well-known, is Ralph Waldo Emerson, also a well-known writer, and he's heard that Thoreau is in jail, and he comes up to the jail and says, and his good friends, says, you know, Ralph, why are you in jail? Do you know the answer? What did Thoreau say? Anyway, this actually was this kind of impressed me as a young boy. And I think it's a sort of a little dialogue that has always kept in my mind. Why are you in jail? And Thoreau said, why aren't you in jail too? You should be in here with me. What are you doing out there? My position is the right one. Maybe it was. But should we put people who break the laws, like not paying his tax to fight a war, in jail? Should we? How about someone like Gandhi? It's also civil disobedience. He breaks the law, but not not using violence, non-violent protest. Or how about Martin Luther King? Shall we stick him in jail too? In other words, you can see people who question authority, question the way things are, question the laws. And sometimes those type of people are necessary. Well, do you want to let Socrates go free? If you were at that time, maybe you wouldn't. He was charged with corrupting the youth, his education system, asking questions, and failing to give due respect to the gods. There were rumors against him, and we talked about them. Well, his teaching methods, he wasn't a storyteller like the epics. He didn't want the people to memorize facts and just simply memorize texts and know stories. He wanted to know, the reasons behind things. He wanted to ask questions, and he wants to make arguments, and he wants other people to argue with him, to debate. And then there's a sort of almost a kind of continual questioning. He thought that continual questioning is the essence of education, not the telling of stories. So his manner of teaching was sort of conversational or argumentative, trying to find arguments that were rational, that could withstand the test of reason, and not just stories that were accepted as somehow true because it's written down or you could hear it and it was always repeated over and over again and therefore must be true. Instead of military valor and military combat, he actually wants to have verbal combat and thinking. The person with the best argument should be the winner, not the one with the most force. This is, of course, and you've read about it, I'm sure, by now, because we had what's called the Socratic method. Okay. Now, later in the course, I'm going to talk to you about Fukuzawa Yukichi. And we'll talk about his Gakumon no Susume. He encouraged learning. This is in the 1870s in Japan. And Fukuzawa also encouraged learning, encouraged Gakumon, because he wanted people to become intelligent so they could become good citizens. And just like you know that phrase that Socrates used called the unexamined life is not worth living. We get that phrase over and over again. The people who don't think. And basically what he's saying is not only to kind of all the people in Athens, and including the leaders, they're basically stupid. They're not thinking. They're the unexamined life. And only those people who think. Basically, and I bring up Fukuzawa because Fukuzawa also referred to the people of the Edo period, the Ippan Shitobito. There was an education system, right? People went to Terakoya, they learned reading and writing, and they could read some of the classical texts. But he basically said the people of the Edo period are guming, stupid people. They're not thinking for themselves. They're just, they're just stupid. And they are not good citizens. They're just, gumi. And how to take those stupid people and make them active, stimulate them, make them citizens, good citizens, citizens who will, instead of just being passive and do what everybody tells you, will be more stimulating, will help the government, will be a part of the new Japan. それは学問の勧め. He wants to create a active, informed, intelligent people, citizens, who will be not just simply kind of passive recipients of, like paternal, like, if you're in the Edo period, all you have to do is basically be like children, be quiet and follow orders. He wants to have a little bit more active people. And so I'll talk more about him, but this is basically Socrates' points. He mentioned in his text, in his apology, he likened himself to a gadfly. And he talked about a gadfly stinging a lazy horse. Do you know what a gadfly is? It's a type of a fly. A fly in Japanese is hai, right? And a big fly that stings. あれはabu. Okay? And sometimes abu, and it might get on the horse and sting it, and the horse jumps up and kind of gallops away, right? Otherwise, horse is just kind of not thinking, just kind of going. But then suddenly, it gets a little energy when the gadfly stings it. What's he talking about? He says, the government of Athens should really praise me for being that gadfly that stings the lazy horse. What's that mean? Anybody? What's Socrates talking about? Stimulating the youth, yeah. And what's the lazy horse? What's that? Yeah, people aren't participating. It's just sort of, like it's the society at that time. It's Athenians. It's the so-called democracy, but democracy sounds good, doesn't it? But what happens if it's democracy by stupid people? And they're not thinking. What happens when you have mass rule by people who aren't intelligent? Should you say, okay, since the majority of the people who are not intelligent think this is the way it should be done, shall we follow them? Because they are people and they're voting. And Socrates is asking these type of questions. People in power don't like it, do they? Sting the horse, get society moving, activate it, stimulate it. And he says, like the gadfly stinging the back of a sluggish horse, he wants to wake up democracy so that it could conduct business in a more reflective and more reasonable way. What about Japanese democracy today? 日本は民主主義でしょ? アメリカもそうよ. America is a democracy. What do you think? Do they need some stimulation? Yeah. And these are whole questions here. if a public opinion poll says everybody should go to war and support the troops, all of that, is that the reason why people should go to war? What happens when people question? Should you just say, oh, you're not a member of the majority, we should silence you? We don't care about your opinion. Everybody else wants to go to war. In other words, still contemporary democracies, we love democracies. I think it's a good type of government. It's much better than a tyranny. But still, many democracies are capable of having bad reasons, bad judgments, sloppy thinking. And instead of actual thinking might rely on propaganda or on emotion or empty arguments. That's something that Socrates wants us to guard against. Okay, you have to go.
What should I do with this?
Write something on it.
Write something on it?
Yeah. The comment sheets are sort of to tell me that you're here today, and also that you're thinking, not just sitting and occupying, a chair. So you might have a question, you might have a reaction, but don't just say, interesting. Why? What did you learn? Just a little comment here and there. And I know a couple people have to go early. Another form of education, I said, was that by the playwrights who wrote tragedies and comedies. And as I said, they are more than simple entertainment. They were also a type of mass public education. And in fact, these playwrights were often called teachers. I think that's right, isn't it? They were not just a drama. They were also sensei, teachers. They asked questions. And they demanded and expected you, the viewers, to think. They expected answers. They expected critical thinking. They might have been different questions and so forth, but we'll see. And I'll let Sano Sensei tell you a little bit more, and then about Athenian tragedy. These are sorts of questions that were raised in the play. Some of the questions are the same things like Socrates. Things that are difficult to answer, or society doesn't want to hear, or society wants to avoid these type of issues, kind of taboo topics, get raised up. These are sort of ethical issues. What's right? And especially when you have kind of, for example, you're loyal to your state, but you're also loyal to your father, your family. Which is more important to you? Say you have a younger brother and he committed a crime. Should you turn him in? Or you should provide refuge for him. Especially when that crime is probably not so difficult. There's all these issues that get debated in society, and and one public forum, a way of making people think about difficult issues, was through tragedy. And I think that's what you're going to talk about. So. Okay, Sano Sensei, dozo.
I'm very, very grateful for this great opportunity to speak to you. I recognize some of you who attended my class, but most of you are quite new to me, so this is a very special, great opportunity to meet new people. And listening to Professor Steele's lecture on Socrates and his method, I wholeheartedly agree with him that his method is a really effective way of the sleeping public to wake up. And I'm now talking about playwrights. So that's about, especially in the form of tragedies. So my first topic will be Greek tragedies in general. And I'll supplement a little bit more about what Professor Steele talked about. Socrates, on his own way, he talked to every citizen in person So that's a very impressionable, very strong impression. But on the other hand, there's that today I'm going to concentrate on Greek tragedy. And Professor Steele mentioned tragedy. Yes, mentioned that the tragic poets, the playwright, are called teachers. And because I'm a specialist on Greek classics, I like to introduce you with the original Greek words. That is didaskalos. With using the Greek letters, that's didaskalos. Didaskalos, and that simply means teacher. Now, why is the Greek tragic poet, the playwright, is called teacher, didaskalos? There are two levels of the meanings. On the surface level, the tragic poets not only wrote plays, but also they acted as stage directors. ギリシャ悲劇詩人は作品書くだけじゃなくて舞台監督としても活躍してたんですね。So the playwright, today I'm going to talk about especially one Greek poet, tragic poet called Sophocles. So Sophocles wrote plays including Antigone, which will be the main topic of my talk, Antigone, and other plays. But he also came to the practice for the production. So he taught actors. And also in Greek tragedy, it's very important that there is a chorus in the production. And he taught chorus how to sing the songs in the tragedy. So Greek tragedy is something like musicals, not only words, but also songs. So on one level, Greek playwrights are called didaskalos, teacher, because they taught the actors and the chorus. That's one level. But also, as Professor Steele mentioned, another level. Through the production of these plays, playwrights educated the Athenian public. He taught, those playwrights taught very important ethical issues to the public. I use the expression taught, but maybe made people think about essential issues will be a better expression, I think. So Greek drama in general, especially in tragedies, audience is almost a compulsory. It's a compulsory that they have to think about very essential issues. Now, I'm going to show you a few pictures. So this is the theater in Athens. If you go to Athens as a tourist, you see this. Now, there is at the center of ancient Athenian town, there's a quite steep hill, which is called Acropolis. That's the center of the city. And on the hill, the slope of this hill is built, this theater. So this slope goes on to this hill, which is Acropolis, center of this city, and where the famous temples like Temple of Parthenon stands. Now, on this, at the bottom of this hill is this building, this theater. Now, this stage of theater was built in the Roman age, about 2nd century AD. But in Socrates' days, in 5th century, the stage construction was a bit different. So I'll show you another chart or a drawing, which is by an archaeologist who tried to reconstruct the state of this this theater in the age of 5th century BC. In the previous picture, you might have noticed, actually this is upside down. In the previous picture, the audience was on this side, but in this picture, the audience is there. And if you go up the hill, you go to the Acropolis. Now, in front of the audience, there's this circle area. This is very important. This circle area is called orchestra in Greek. I use your kind of alphabet this time. Orchestra. Now, this is the obviously the etymology of the word orchestra. We use this word in the meaning of music band, 管弦楽団の意味で使いますね。But actually, originally this word, Greek word orchestra, meant this circle space where the chorus, remember in tragedies and also including comic in other Greek drama, there are not only actors but also chorus. And in Greek tragedy, the presence of chorus is very, very essential. Now, in this circle area, the chorus not only sang but danced, because I think they made a circular movement, so they needed this circle space. And this stage is back of this orchestra. On the stage, the actors performed. So sort of above the actors, the chorus attracted the attention of the audience. だからその合唱隊がとっても目立ったんですね。That's very important. So after this, I go into Antigone, and this presence, very conspicuous presence of a chorus, is very important. This says older temple. This theater actually stands in a religious sanctuary. Sanctuary dedicated to the god Dionysus. Dionysus という神ですね。The god Dionysus is a god of agriculture in general, and also Dionysus, a god of wine, god of grapes, and god of wine in particular. So this production of Greek tragedy is not a simple entertainment, as Professor Steele said. It's quite right. He was quite right that it's not only a simple entertainment, but that's a religious event. And this event was paid for by rich citizens. So that's a kind of a special tax for rich Athenian citizens. So this production of Greek tragedies and Greek drama in general was not only a simple entertainment, but religious and state event. So let's keep that in mind when we go into Antigone. Page 1, there's dramatis personae. What sort of people appear in this play? And to make it a bit easier, I will draw a family tree here. So there is this name doesn't appear there, but there's a Queen Iocaste. Iocaste was married to King Laius, and the son was Oedipus. Now, Queen Iocaste was a sister of Creon. So this name Creon appears as the king of Thebes. So this play, Antigone, is set in the ancient town of Thebes. 日本語でテーバイって言いますね。テーバイ Thebes, which is different from Athens. It's quite interesting that in Athenian tragedy, it's quite rare that Athens itself is chosen as the dramatic setting. Usually, other cities, and especially this Thebes, Thebai, is chosen as the dramatic setting. And also another thing about Greek tragedy is that they don't usually choose contemporary events as their topic. It's usually, traditionally, they usually take Greek mythology as their subject. In contrast to tragedy, in comedy, they refer to contemporary events. But in tragedy, playwrights chose events from mythical past, which is quite apart from contemporary world. Now, I go back. So these people are not a real living person in the 5th century BC, but they belong to Greek mythology. And so Creon is married to a lady called Eurydice. Now this appears on your handout. Eurydice, his wife, Creon's wife, and their son is Haemon. Now, very peculiar characteristics of this family is that Iocaste, mother, and her son Oedipus unconsciously got married. Oedipus came to the town of Thebes without knowing that he is the son of Iocaste. And Oedipus performed a great deed. And at that time, King Laius was dead. So Oedipus was rewarded with the wedding with the queen. But he didn't know that fact. As soon as he was born, he was actually put away from the town of Thebes, and he was raised from somebody else in the town of Corinth, another town, and he wasn't told about his real parents. So he came to Thebes, and he married Iocaste, actually his mother, but he didn't know that fact. Now their children, four of them, Polynices, and Eteocles, and Antigone, and Ismene. Now, those 4 children were born between Oedipus and Iocaste. After Oedipus knew this hideous fact that he, without knowing, he got married with his mother. And actually, before he got married, again, without knowing, he killed his father. When he knew that fact, he blinded himself. And he actually went away from the town of Thebes. After Oedipus is away, is gone, Polynices and Eteocles, those are male, those 2 brothers, agreed that they will rule this town of Thebes in turns. And they agreed that Eteocles is going to rule this town for a few years, and Eteocles will resign, and Polynices will be the king. But first, Eteocles became the king. And when it came the time that he was going to resign, it was agreed that he was to resign. He refused. Instead, he banished Polynices from Thebes. So Polynices went away from Thebes and went to another strong town called Argos. And he led the army of Argos. And he attacked his own city, Thebes, with the army of Argos, so that he tried to resume his kingship. So that was the story, that was the event behind this tragedy, Antigone. In that war between Thebes and this invading army, which was led by Polynices, in this war, these two brothers actually killed each other. So both of them are dead now when this play starts. Who is going to be the next king is a question. And Creon, by the closeness of their blood relationship, Creon was chosen as the next king. So this is the basic background of this play. So let's go into this handout. And on page 1, after this dramatis persona, before going to the content, at the end of this dramatis personae, the chorus is mentioned, the chorus of Theban elders. In every Greek tragedy, there is a chorus. They are not actors, but a group of people, and they have identity. So in this particular play, they are experienced old men of this town. And they are going to exchange opinions with the actors. The presence of chorus invites the audience to think about what's going on the stage. The presence of chorus is, partly they are the part of the play, but also because chorus is a group of people, and behind the chorus who are occupying this circle place, the group of Athenian citizens. So chorus is a sort of an intermediary between the Athenian public, who are the audience, and the actors who are acting this mythical past. だからこの合唱隊ですね、コロスがいることによって、この聴衆である、アテネの市民たちが劇の中にこう半分入る感じでね、コの合唱隊が自分たちの代表みたいな感じになって、なるんですね。So chorus will raise questions about what the actors are doing or what the actors are saying. So this chorus act of questioning invites the Athenian citizens to raise their own questions. Now I go into the first verse by Creon. At the end of this paragraph, there's in the brackets, the figure 162 to 174 appears. That's actually line numbering of this play. So there's some action between Antigone and Ismene before this scene, but actually I'm going to begin with Creon's words. Now this is the first appearance of Creon in this play. Creon, after this war in which both sons of Oedipus are dead, Creon is going to become the new king of Thebes. So this is the moment where Creon is going to announce his own principle is governing this town of Thebes. So let's look at it. Creon says, "Sirs," so he directly addresses the chorus members. Chorus members are always in this space called orchestra. So on the surface, Creon is addressing the chorus, but the audience might feel that they themselves are addressed, and they are addressed as sirs now. Sirs, the vessel of our state, after being tossed on wild waves, hath once more been safely steadied by the gods. Now here, in literary terms, the metaphor is used. The state of Thebes, このテーバイという国家ですね。The state of Thebes is seen as a ship. テーバイという国家が、一艘の船であるようにこう例えられている、ね、そういうメタファー、暗喩メタファーですね。Now, so he sees that this town of Thebes as the one unity, which has the common interest, common purpose. Now, if I go on to the second paragraph, that begins with no man can be freely known, and maybe I might jump to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, fifth line of the second paragraph, from the middle of the line, and if any makes a friend of more account, if any makes a friend of more account than his fatherland, that man hath no place in my regard. So what Creon is talking about as his general principle of his new rule, he sees this town of Thebes as one unity, and also he says that if one person thinks his friend is more important than the fatherland, this country, that person is of no account for him. He has no place in Creon's regard. And if I jump 4 lines below, deem the country's foe as a friend to myself after that. So the 3 lines from the bottom of this paragraph, remembering this, that our country is the ship that bears us safe, and that only while she refers to this state as a ship, the town of Thebes prospers in our voyage, can we make true friends. So Creon repeats the metaphor of state as a ship here. So he makes a very strong impression that he sees this country, which he's going to rule from now, as one unity, and also he requests all the citizens to regard the state itself as superb value, and even state is above your friends. So this is question begging, isn't it? People might think, okay, it's right that state is very important, especially in those days when warfare is everywhere. But friends are sometimes very important. Now, Creon quite specifically says that friend is less than country. So people might think, people might question about this attitude. Now, so I jump, at the beginning of the third paragraph, that is the bottom of the first page, second line from the bottom. Such are the rules by which I guard this city's greatness, and in accord with them is the edict. So Creon has already pronounced some rules, but also he's going to pronounce other rules. That's edict. It's the edict which I have now published to the folk, touching the sons of Oedipus. Those sons of Oedipus are Polynices and Eteocles. That Eteocles, who hath fallen fighting for our city in all renown of arms, shall be entombed and crowned with every right that follows the noblest dead to their rest. So Eteocles, who fought on the side of the town of Thebes, he died. So Creon is going to bury him. Creon is going to give Eteocles a full funeral rite, state funeral. But on the other hand, going back to the text, but for his brother Polynices, who came back from exile and sought to consume utterly with fire the city of his fathers and the shrines of his fathers' gods, sought to taste kindred blood. And I jump 2 lines to our people, that none shall grace him with sepulchre or lament, but leave him unburied, a corpse for birds and dogs to eat, a ghastly sight of shame. So Creon is going to give Eteocles a state funeral, but for Polynices, just leave the corpse bare around, so for the birds and dogs to devour. This is also another debatable treatment. Polynices is just a hangyaksha against his own country, but is his corpse should be treated that way or not? That is a question-begging statement, isn't it? So that is the pronouncement of Creon's principle of rule of this country. And to that, in response to that, I skip the next paragraph and go to the words of leader of the chorus. So the chorus have their own say. You know, they are a group of people, and the leader of this Theban elders will speak to Creon. I read this. Such is thy pleasure, Creon, son of Menecius, touching this city's foe and its friend. And thou hast power, I ween, to take what order thou wilt, both for the dead and for all us who live. Now, what is the tone of this word of leader of the chorus? The chorus seems not to be entirely agreeing with what Creon said. The chorus recognizes Creon's political power, but the leader of the chorus doesn't openly say anything against Creon, but I think he shows that he's not really following every word of Creon's ruling principle. Now, after that, in your text, there are 3 dots, 3 vertical dots. That means there are some words and actions in between. And what happened in there is that a messenger, first messenger, arrived. And he told Creon and the elders that somebody put earth, put sands on the corpse of Polynices. In a very short moment when the guards were not looking. So at this stage, somebody, against Creon's edict, tried to give a funeral to Polynices. But at this stage, people don't know who did it. After this message, the leader of the chorus said this, I read this, O king, my thoughts have long been whispering, can this deed, you know, this sprinkling of sands on the corpse of Polynices, this deed perchance be even the work of gods. So the instinct of the elder, the leader of the chorus, is that this real surface burial of Polynices might be the work of God. It may be that gods are approving the burial of Polynices. But hearing this, what Creon said, look, I read the words, cease, he said, stop. That's nonsense, was the Creon's verse. Cease, ere thy words fill me utterly with wrath, lest thou be found at once an old man and foolish. So in Creon's eyes, this attempt of burial of Polynices is nothing to do with God's will. クレヨンの考えでは、この国家に反逆したポリネーケスをね、埋葬するっていうのはその神々の意志であるはずがない、ね。Crayons thought there's no chance of God's approving the burial of Polynices. Now, so I go on, but at the end of this paragraph, I go on to this. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, fifth line from the bottom, from the middle of the line. It cannot be the will of the gods. No, from the first there were certain people in the town that muttered against me, chaffing at this edict, wagging their heads in secret, and kept not their necks duly under the yoke, like men contented with my sway. So in Crayon's view, someone who sprinkled sands on the corpse of Polynices was not a god at all. That person must be someone who is who is a human being against Crayon's rule. And at the end of this verse, he used this expression. This person who is against his rule kept not their necks duly under the yoke. So in other words, in Crayon's view, good citizens should put their neck under the yoke. Yoke is an instrument to two cattle put together, and so that the yoke will connect them, and at the end of the yoke, a cargo or something is attached. So for heavy labor, to use the animals for labor, this yoke is used. So for Crayon's view, good citizens are something like cattle who are used for state purposes. Now, if I go on to the other side of this handout, if I have enough time at the end of the discussion, I might go into this page 3. This is one of the choral song in which a human being is praised. So at the top of page 3, it says Ode to Humans. So this is a list of various technological developments which human beings acquired. So on the surface, at least, this seems to be ode of human beings, praise of human beings. Now after this, I go on to page 4. That's Antigone's words. So by now, people knew. After the first attempt of actually, the person who sprinkled sands on Polynices' corpse was actually Antigone, a lady, a woman. And it may be interesting that in Greek tragedies, a very prominent person in that tragedy are female rather than male. In this drama, Antigone, who questions the political authority of Creon, is a female person. That is very interesting. Not only this play, but also in other plays too. Sometimes female are put in that sort of role. Now I go into Antigone's words. Yes, for it was not Zeus that had published me that edict. Not such are the laws set among men by the justice who dwells with the gods below. Nor deemed I that thy decrees, Creon's decrees, Creon's orders, thy decrees were of such force that a mortal human being, a mortal, could override the unwritten and unfailing statutes of heaven. This is quite impressive words by Antigone. So Antigone posits two levels of laws. One is human law, and another is divine law. The decrees of Creon forbidding the burial of Polynices belong to human law, only human law. One ruler of a city can create, if that is a rather tyrannical rule, that ruler can, by his own will, can create any law at all. So human law can be changeable. But in contrast to that, the divine law, in Antigone's words, they are unwritten and unfading, that is eternal, unchanging statutes of heaven. So Antigone sees Creon's edict, Creon's decree of the forbidding this Polynices corpse belongs to human law, whereas Antigone herself stands on the side of divine law. この法律を人間の法と神々の法に分けて、クレオンが出した命令っていうのは人間の法に過ぎないって言ってね。で、アンティゴネは私は神々の法に立ってるんですね。So the act of burial of Polynices' corpse belongs to divine law. Divine law is unwritten, so it is rather difficult to grasp. But that may be something like natural human ethics, which all the people might approve. So the dead body should be buried is a long-standing tradition, and everybody should really follow this. But against this human tradition, traditional ethical custom, Creon decreed the prohibition of Polynices' corpse. So Antigone sees herself as standing firmly on the divine law's side. Now this is another question-raising point of this play, isn't it? So I think it's about the time to finish this. In this way, actors themselves in this play and also the chorus members sometimes specifically raise questions about the political authority or maybe in sometimes the human arrogance in the natural world. In this play, political authority is the center of attention. But sometimes these political and ethical issues are just posit in front of the audience. So the audience are invited to think about their own solutions. So it's quite interesting that this is, at the start of my talk today, I said that this Greek tragedy, which was performed in this sort of setting, and was sort of run by financial basis was a state. Special tax for rich people were used for the production of this play. So this is a state event. But in this state event, this sort of question about rule is raised. Very interesting. One reason for that may be in Athens of the 5th century BC, a danger of the appearance of tyrants were very conscious among the citizens. Athens was under the rule of tyrants in the 6th century BC. And they got away from the tyrant's rule and they developed their own democracy. And they completed the democracy in the 5th century. But they are conscious. Some of the politicians are acquiring, accumulating very great political power. So they are very conscious that this danger of the appearance of tyrants. So maybe the political issue, the questioning of political authority in this way may be connected with this general feeling of danger of the appearance of tyrants. So that concludes my talk here. And so that's one way of one form of citizens' education in 5th century BC, and which complements the Socratic method, which is by face-to-face individual method. So that's the end of it. Thank you very much.
So what would you do? Here's the case. Antigone is actually sister of Polonices and Edwin, two are her brothers. One brother has been declared a traitor, the other brother as a hero. And then you can't bury, and they want the city, the state, the government says, oh, you can't bury the, you have to leave it out for the dogs. But your sister, they're both your brothers, right? And you can see that she's, how come I can only give funeral rites to one brother and not to the other? And being brothers and sisters is a different thing from being a traitor and a hero. So what would you do? どうですか? If you were confronted. By the way, in Boshin Senso, you might have watched the Taiga drama about Yamamoto Yai and the Yaizakura, right? If you were on the Aizu side and you got killed, the government said you had to leave the body out, unattended, for the dogs and the crows to come pick. Whereas the Hangun side, they get put into proper burial. And so this is not an old story, it's a new story. It's up. Even now, the traders you just leave them out. But secretly, some people went out and buried the so-called side of the Aizu or the Tohoku Renmei, and in trouble sometimes. You do. どうですか? If you were Antigone and your sister or your brother, two brothers have been killed, would you be willing to defy the law and bury him? Actually, I add one more thing. This sister here, there's two sisters. She said, okay. She went along with it. She was a meek. She just said, okay, if that's the way the law is, shikata ga nai. Didn't like it, but she said that's the way the government. But Antigone was very strong. and so she resisted. How about you? どうですか? Are you powerful enough, strong enough to resist the state? And what do you think is more important, the family or the government? What rule, I guess, to human rule and divine rule, but also in the sense of your loyalties to your family or to the government? What's stronger? But in a wartime situation, many people are confronted. I think of like especially civil wars, like the American Civil War, Nambok Senso. Many people are, have family members on both sides. 2つの相国ありますね. And then and it's caught between. Even Japanese in the Second World War, some are American, Japanese, Nikkei American, and some are Nihonjin American, and they get trapped on both sides. So these are kind of issues. But you see what the play is doing is posing that question to you, the audience, right? Asking you, what will you do if you were Antigone? Will you be meek and bow down before the state, or will you be what happened to Antigone? What did she die? She killed herself. She
died actually. Yeah, it's a tragedy. So in original decree of Creon, said that anyone who tried to bury Polynices should be killed, executed. But in the course of the play, Creon recognizes that the people are not on his side. People are moving towards Antigone's side. So he weakened his statement, and he actually did not kill Antigone. He didn't execute Antigone, but he put her in a cave with a minimal of food in there. But Antigone on herself killed herself in that cave. So that's and knowing Antigone's death, actually Haemon was the fiancé of Antigone. So Haemon killed himself, and hearing Haemon's death, Eurydice, Creon's wife, killed herself. So that's the events. Yeah, that's very tragic. Yeah.
Creon is he lost his wife, he lost his son, he lost his son or the woman, and probably he lost his rule too. I don't know what happened after that. Yeah. And of course, even though it's set in Thebes, it's really a message to the people of Sparta, what's happening at this time. Actually, a lot of the Japanese plays, like kabuki, which sounds like a fun, nice thing. There are also messages in there too for the people of Edo. So theater carries with it that sort of social education and asking you questions, posing ethical questions, choices. What would you do in their stead? And it's part of the tragedy, you learn from that. Well, here's the choices that you have to make. What choice will you make? What are the responsibilities? What are yours, and will you, once you make a choice, will you follow up with the consequences of that choice? So let's stop here a little bit and get some questions from you. Anything you wanted that comes to your mind? Yeah.
Antigone should obey the Creon's human law because the Polynices, how to say it? Polynices has already already died, and there is just a body, and we cannot do anything to the dead person, I think. But I don't know the Antigone's mind, but we cannot do anything to the dead person. Then I think in the society we have to think about the future, because the war is already gone. Then it comes to the peace. Then we have to think of the future, and maybe obeying the human laws, so-called the Creon's laws, then we can make the society smoothly. How can I say?
And that will society will be pretty, just keep going. That's the kind of the easy way out.
But maybe I don't know the Antigone's really mind, but maybe she really want to bury her brother. But for me, I don't mind about the body because he has already.
Okay, but how about the other body? The other brother is becoming a hero. It's sort of Anyway, yeah, I got your point. You want to say something?
So I wanted to say that Antigone follows the divine law, but at the end of the tragedy, we can see that the divine law won the fight, I would say, because Antigone sacrificed herself for her brother, and this notion of sacrifice and love is repeated through Haemon dying for her Antigone, and then Eurydice dying for Haemon. So I think it proves that divine law is more important, but then because people change, you have to adapt the human law to this. So
that's a good response. I mean, both people are having different. It's by no means was everybody going to think the same.
Counting that, I think we need to focus on what the society was, because by that time, I think they're taking the Homeric stories like seriously. So like burying the dead body was like important to them, and like I think Arete and like Kleos, they're like honoring the warriors was important to them. So like I think right now, like when we think about it, it's just a dead body, but like to me, I think I would just go and like bury the body if I was Antigone, because of like that's how like I would like
At that time.
at that time,
the
yeah,
kind of the ways of thinking and
Ways of
acting at
thinking
that time
and-
are different from now.
right.
And you can just kind of leave dead bodies around now, or you still
Well, if it was my family, I would wanna
you
bury,
do
yeah.
something.
Yeah,
Even if it was even if your brother was a Hangyaksha.
yeah.
Okay, that's kind of human. Yeah. Speak
Well,
loud.
I guess this is not like directly with the story itself, but the whole conversation reminded me of Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan, and
Oh yes.
like how they talk about going against the society might just cause chaos, and instead of, even though you're trying to protect yourself, in the end you're destroying the society, and so everybody becomes like.
Yeah, what happens if everybody's like Socrates and asking questions all the time?
Yeah.
And not just one gadfly, but everybody, and then the whole society's all messed up, right?
But yeah, but at the same time, like, I think there's definitely truth in terms of having to stick with the laws of society, of course, but at the same time, like, who can say that the laws are correct, or like to what extent? So I mean, it's kind of an endless conversation, but yeah, I don't know, that's just what I was.
But a necessary conversation, right? Yeah, endless, but yeah, actually ongoing. And that's why people are, actually when we watch even like television dramas and so forth, Inspector Morse or something like that, and there's various murders and so, but you immediately put yourself in that situation. What would I do? And it has the sort of personal as well as just entertainment,
I was also wondering about, like you said, the Greek tragedy looks at the historical and the myths, but I was also wondering about comedy, because I think he mentioned that the comedy looks at mostly the contemporary stuff. So I thought maybe that's because they're trying not to raise the recent issues, so that the audience doesn't think about the society right now. They're only thinking about the traditions that are coming up from.
In some cases, I'll let Sano-sensei answer that, but in some cases, even though it's set in the past and in a different country, everybody knows that it's not really the past and it's really the present, and that this person there's a sort of understanding, and yet there's a sort of also a sort of barrier between, a protection, that it's not direct, it's a little indirect, but people do know that even though it's set in the history, it's really about the present. But how about the comedies?
A few words about Greek comedy. In Greek comedies like Aristophanes' comedies, in crowds, Socrates appeared on stage in person. An actor acted as Socrates. So in that, like that, in many of the Aristophanes comedies, real existing politicians, contemporary politicians, were put on stage and they were ridiculed. But remember, comedies are meant to be funny. So if anything is said on the stage, they are not taken to be seriously. So that's why on the stage of comedies, the political issues, political contemporary issues could be raised. But in tragedy, because they don't set the contemporary Athens as their scene, background scene, but in mythical past and in other places. So in that way, they could raise very serious political issues on stage. If they do that in political contemporary Athens, that might be people might get into the playwright like Sophocles may get in trouble, but in comedy, because they are meant to be funny. But nevertheless, there is that Aristophanes, there's a contemporary politician called Creon, and Aristophanes ridiculed Creon on stage, and Creon, at that time, a powerful politician, fined Aristophanes. That could have happened, but anyway, that's one funny situation. Is the one comment.
Okay, we'll have to come to an end here, but again, as you are the audience of a play, you can see and the playwright, the teacher, is asking you to think, and also to think what that situation, what does it mean to me? How would I do that? And what decision would I make? Would I do the same thing as Antigone, or would I do the same thing as Ismene? Am I strong? Am I courageous? Or what's better for the society, just to follow the law or not? You see, those sorts of issues are just kind of presented to you to think about. And it's also a form of education. Socrates is engaging you in a kind of one-to-one debate. But the playwright is actually taking on the masses. And it means the whole city are there invited to come and listen and talk and think. Okay, if you need any questions, come up and see me afterwards. Otherwise, I'll see you next Thursday. 頑張ってくださいね。